Good morning. First of all, thanks for being here very early on a Saturday morning to listen to a talk about the internet. I assure you, it's not going to be as boring as you may think it will be. Also, apologies to Saria, our translator. There's going to be a lot of technical jargon in this, so I will do my best. That said, as she said, my name is Michael Oghia. I graduated from AUB. I did my master's in sociology. Since then, I have worked, aside from Lebanon, in India and in Turkey, and soon I'll be in Serbia as well. And I've actually worked in almost everything that a sociologist could work in, which including academia. I've worked in civil society, I've worked in conflict resolution, I worked in journalism, and now I'm working in internet governance. So I will get into what that is, and I'm very excited to tell you a little bit. But with that said, we need to talk a little bit rather, if my device will respond to me. Yeah, it's not responding for whatever reason. Let me exit and try again. Go figure. There we go. So what exactly is the internet? Everybody in here uses the internet. You all have heard about the internet. Well, what if I told you that it's more than just Google Chrome and cat videos? There's actually quite a lot about the internet that makes up what it is, that constitutes how it functions. It's called a network of networks. The idea is that each little node can connect to something else, and then together all of these nodes constitute what we know as the internet. I'm going to be going through these quickly, so let me know if I speak too quickly or if I go fast. So, we hear a lot about kind of the internet, but again, we don't really know how it functions. So basically, data will go from one computer through all of these different nodes, and if you can see, it can go in many different ways until it gets to another computer, and from there, it's kind of all assembled again. Now, how this happens is quite irrelevant, actually, because it might go very far away, and then some data might go to another place, but at the end, it all kind of assembles together. So, I've gotten asked a lot of times, kind of, why am I interested in the internet? Actually, let's get a bit deeper. Let's get a bit meta for a second, because if we think about kind of existence, consciousness as what we are, consciousness is what enables the universe to understand itself. We understand planets, we understand the universe, we understand galaxies, we understand how organisms function. What that is that it's in many ways trying to put labels and trying to understand how the universe functions. Well, if we're taking that logic, then the internet is an extension of human consciousness. And in many ways, that's what makes me excited about it. The fact that the wealth of all of humanity's accumulated knowledge is basically accessible online. And now with that said, that means that we have to do a lot in order to protect the internet. One of which is that we have to keep it global. If you ever hear about fragmented internet, one of the problems is that that some countries like Russia or like China, they want to keep the internet in a certain way. The whole purpose of why we have the internet is because it's global. Because you can go to Australia and access Google, and it's the same Google that you would get if you accessed it in the United States, or if you accessed it in Lebanon or anywhere else. So we have to keep it open so that everyone can access it. We need to keep it free, and by free, not free from cost, but free from restrictions. We need to make it end-to-end so that it functions in one place and it also functions in another, because otherwise it's just kind of data would just be spilling out nowhere. And then it needs to be user-centric, and then it needs to be interoperable, which means I can pick up a phone and use the phone, and I can pick up a laptop and use the laptop, same thing. And then lastly, it needs to be robust and reliable. Nobody needs something that is going to break down or stop working every once in a while. So This is network architecture. So again, we have to get through the basics before we get to the more fun stuff. So first of all, there's the physical layer, and then there's the protocol layer, the application layer, and the content layer. Now, what does all of this mean? I'll show you. So the physical layer is basically like the fiber in the ground. And I'll tell you a little bit more about fiber, but it's basically anytime you're thinking of wires, you're thinking of 3G or Wi-Fi, that's all at the physical layer. That's all something that's installed, a company installed, people installed, the university installed. But then after that, there's something called protocol. So if anybody's ever heard of TCP/IP, Transmission Control Protocol, it's basic, or HTTP. You see like HTTP / colon backslash. That's at the protocol level. It's a way that that computers and internet connected devices communicate. Then there's the application layer, which is like www, using email, using HTML, any of these kind of things. That layer. And then lastly, there's the content layer. Now, which of these layers do you think is the most contentious? Is the most is what usually gets people the most excited and angry and whatnot? Which of these? The content layer, exactly. most governments, most privacy organizations, whatever, they're not dealing with physical infrastructure. They're dealing with content. They're dealing what goes on the internet. When we think about what is on the internet, we're generally talking about the content layer, which, like I said, search engines, websites, it's basically anything that Google can find is at the content layer. So I just want to play a quick, so first of many, I want to play a quick video. This is going to explain the physical infrastructure a little bit more. No, it's not. Sorry. Can you put the sound on? Keep doing it.
We never stop hearing about how the internet's in the cloud, but really, it's in the ocean. About 300 undersea fiber optic cables are responsible for 99% of international data traffic. It's basically the same way we connect to each other in a single country, except underwater instead of underground. They transmit PewDiePie from Europe to America, and they connect stock traders in New York and London. And these cables, placed by private companies, are the backbone of the internet. But if you held one in your hand, it'd be no bigger than a soda can. There are just a few layers of protection from the water, including petroleum jelly. Yes, your internet is covered in Vaseline. They're vulnerable to earthquakes. At least a few times, confused sharks have bitten them. But many cables are beneath sea life because in some places they go as deep underwater as Mount Everest is high. Ships lower a plow that digs a tiny groove in the ocean floor, lay in the cable, and it's naturally buried by sand, thanks to the ocean's current. And that process, it's both stunningly simple and mind-blowingly complex, is responsible for making the internet a truly global network. It's an idea that's audacious and crazy, and you think it has to be cutting edge, and it is, but it's also been going on for 157 years. Electric telegraphs have been around for a long, long time. Experiments in the early 1800s connected two ends of a garden using a clock that revealed letters. Then they moved on to two neighborhoods to help signal trains, and then multiple cities thanks to a network of railroad lines. Underwater submarine cables were an obvious next step, so they played around. Instead of petroleum jelly, the first ones were coated with exotic tree sap to protect them from the water. And though the undersea cables came in spurts, one of the first ones was knocked out of commission by a fishing boat. By 1858, they reached around the Atlantic and across the world. And that's how it's kind of gone since, laying cables that circle the Earth's oceans. The cables are unwound from the back of the ship, sink to the ocean floor, and the world is connected in speeds measured in milliseconds. There are ideas to bring the internet above sea level. Along with cell phone towers, there's internet beamed from Facebook satellites to Africa, balloons lifted by Google. But for speedy international travel, undersea cables are still where companies like Facebook and Google place their bets. That's because the best way to create the cloud is still by going under the sea.
So, thank you. So, as you saw, like we think about, we don't really necessarily recognize that the reason why we can connect is because all of these cables are laying under the sea. And I think a lot of times we think about the internet as being just like this giant thing, that it just kind of exists, but actually, no. It does have a physical backbone. So just wrapping that up, basically, whenever you go to a URL, a uniform resource locator, this is the protocol layer. That's a domain. That's the application. That's the domain name, and that's basically kind of like the internet is consisting of an address book, and the address book is the domain name system. And then lastly, for instance, this is a subdomain, and that's the top level domain. So, and there's also something called country code level domain, which is top level domain, which is like .lb or .uk. So that's just a graph of that. I'll skip that for now. There's also root servers located all around the world, which basically store all of these addresses. So like if I want to go to google.com, it's stored on a server somewhere. Where? Well, since the internet was developed originally in the United States, most of the root servers are in the US. There's a couple in Europe and there's one in Japan. However, that's not to say that the root servers are leaving all the other countries behind. If we see, there's actually, this is a map that groups them together, but actually there's quite a few root server mirrors which have a copy of the root server all around the Middle East. Wow, this is really kind of technical. Sorry. So, in the interest of time, yeah, go ahead. Go back? So it's a group, but it's not just Israel. It's Lebanon, there's some in Egypt, and there's one maybe I think in Jordan as well, and there's like a few in Israel. So yeah, and yeah. So there's also, so as I was saying, Internet Protocol consists of this address book called the domain name system. It's managed by a lot of different by these three organizations or three groups of organizations. There's a lot of acronyms within the internet. Don't ask me why. But one thing I want you to take from this slide is that basically there is this old version of Internet Protocol called version 4. And now there's a new version, which it's not actually that new. It came out in 1999. And what it amounts to, and all these slides will be online, so I'm just trying to get through some of them quickly. Basically, what it amounts to is that we're actually out of IPv4. Meaning, and once a device can't connect to the internet using IPv4, it doesn't connect. So imagine trying to get on using your phone, and it won't do it. Well, there are ways to get around it, but they're costly, expensive, they're kind of a hassle. But with IPv6, there are so many numbers available that will last for quite a while, but eventually, as more devices come online, they will have to be supplanted. Now, whenever you think about slow speeds, one of the issues that you're probably gonna face is that there's something called internet exchange points. I promise we're almost done with the technical stuff. And basically what that amounts to is that IXPs in the Middle East especially have not been developing as much as other places, but that's changing. And imagine if you are trying to access, let's say Facebook, and that query is going to the United States. You can imagine it's going to take you a long time to access that website. Well, what if you could access that locally? Obviously, speed would be faster. And that's basically what an IXP facilitates. So if you ever have really slow connections, it might be because of a lack of an IXP. It's basically what allows for internet service providers to share data with each other, so as opposed to sending it out of country. Internationalized domain names. I just wanted to include this because, especially since there's a lot of Arabic, there's a lot of websites now in Arabic. Well, not just in Arabic, but now you can actually use the Arabic domain. Like this is the one for Syria, this is the one for Palestine, Jordan. And whenever you would go to a website, it wouldn't just be like google.com. It would be it would be in Arabic script. And so that's helping that's helping local content proliferate. Am I going too fast? Or I recognize this is a lot of information. Okay, good. All right, so then last bit about the technical stuff before I get into something a little bit more probably relevant to your day-to-day work, is we hear a lot about the dark web and the deep web. Well, imagine it's kind of like an iceberg where basically everything that you can see is the surface web. Whereas deep web are things like databases, medical records, things that you can't find but you can get to on the internet. How many journalists are here? So a lot of journalists, so there's about like, what, 10 in the crowd? Journalists will often use the deep web to keep their identity secret, to connect with sources and that sort of thing. So, because deep web is a little bit harder to access as well. But then the dark web is where all of the nefarious activities happen, where you'll find drug dealing, you'll find human trafficking, you'll find weapons dealing, etc. It is a dark place. It's really it's just a completely, the deep web is not a bad thing. It's not necessarily inherently negative. Dark web is inherently negative. It's where a lot of bad things happen. And this is just another kind of visualization of that. Less than 1% of all content that Google or Bing or Yahoo or whatever could find, it's only 1%. It's even less than 1%. So imagine how much data is out there on the internet that you don't necessarily know how to access. So with that said, how is this giant system that we've created, how is it governed? And by governed, it's like who decides kind of what happens to it? How does it progress? What policies are relevant to it? Well, there's this, what I work in, there's this field now called internet governance. And by the way, I have to be really mindful because I realized during the podcasting exercise that I don't say internet governance, I say internet governance. And that for me is a little bit funny because I've been pronouncing my field wrong the whole time. So in 2003, government, civil society, and which includes academia, and the technical sector, they kind of got together and they were like, mostly the governments, and they were like, we need to do something about this whole internet thing. And so it was called the World Summit for Information Society, WSIS, and they came up with this definition. They had two iterations of this. They had it in 2003 in Geneva, and they had it in 2005 in Tunis. And they came up with this definition. It's basically just like, and I've highlighted what's really important. Different stakeholders come together to help govern the evolution of the internet. You know, imagine it's kind of like, we've kind of created like a sun. And internet governance is what kind of makes sure that the sun doesn't explode and eat us all. Who is involved in this? Like for instance, at the physical layer, there are different organizations. There are different groups of individuals working to keep it functioning and keeping it progressing well. At the protocol layer, there's things like the IETF, which is the Internet Engineering Task Force, or the Internet Association for Assigned Names and Numbers, Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers. Now, I always joke around, I call it alphabet soup, and not just me, other people too. It's basically, there's all these letters, and they mean something, but trying to learn them all can be a little bit frustrating, because they're really, some of them are technical. Actually, all of these right here, except universities, all of them so much, except industry, they're all technical organizations. They're made up of engineers, they're made up of policy analysts, they're made up of communications specialists, people that are working in this field. And then lastly, again, the content layer, which is where, as you know, which is most things that happen. The content layer is what includes rights activists usually, although rights activists are also involved at other layers as well, but it's where journalists would be, it's where the UN is usually involved, etc. So now, where do all of these people, where do all these organizations, where do they meet? Well, They meet at various different events. One of them is the Internet Governance Forum. The Internet Governance Forum, what I attend is, I went for the first time last year, and they have a global IGF. IGF is the acronym, but they also have local and regional events. In this case, there is the Arab IGF. That was held here in Beirut in December of last year, and they're hopefully going to host another one, but they host regional events around the world. And that's where all these stakeholders, they're called stakeholders, all these different organizations come together on equal footing, and they can discuss policy. So instead of it just being like, I'm a government, and I can do what I want, a minister from a government sits down at a table with somebody from Facebook and somebody from Article 19, and they all talk about, on an equal footing, about policy. And it's really an incredible sight to see. Somebody who would normally have a lot of power, the government official, for instance, that is debating these issues in person. Others, like I said, like WSIS, and then there's things like, and then there's some that are only open to governments, which is like the Freedom Online Coalition, or the WCIT, the World Conference on Internet Information Technology. The idea being that some fora are only for some certain stakeholders, but not others. However, this is just a map, just kind of showing you how, for each different layer of the internet, it's really complex. And this is actually one of the biggest criticisms of the internet governance community, is that one, that there's just too much. Like, how do people get into this? How do people learn about this? I feel a little nervous up here now trying to explain it, because it is so complex. How do we expect someone who's already busy at their personal life, with their professional life, to jump into a discussion about digital rights in their home and expect them to know all of these acronyms? They don't, and they won't, and that's okay. So there's different approaches to internet governance. There's one at the national level. This is where probably many of you might be already, if you're working in digital rights, you might already be engaged. There's also the multilateral. That's mostly governments. Making policies with each other about how to do these kind of, how to create policies that are relevant only to nation states and to things like the economy and whatnot. But then we have multi-stakeholder, and that's what I was trying to get at, where you have these different individuals from all around the world, from different groups of people coming together and discussing policy in a way that can help create, that can incorporate more voices. So there are many groups of people, many organizations rather involved. They're usually split into different groups. One is the technical community, one is civil society and academia, another one is government, and then lastly it's private sector. So, for instance, these are some of the logos of technical community. I don't know if anybody would recognize them. Then there's things like, but then on the civil society aspect, there's VPNs, there's the Electronic Frontier Foundation, there's the Save the Children. Does anybody know why Save the Children would be a civil society group involved in internet governance? Close. It's basically child protect. Oh, sorry. Sorry, Dina. Exactly. I know. So she's basically saying, like, there's like cyber stalkers. There's people like child predators, whatnot. It's called child protection online. The idea is whenever internet governance started really coming together in the mid-2000s, most people that were involved were just like the technical guys, or maybe people and ladies, but mostly guys, and maybe in governments that obviously saw how it could affect them politically or it could affect them economically, and also the private sector who wanted to make money from the internet. However, now groups like Save the Children are being more, it's basically new actors are coming in all the time. Save the Children, a primarily child rights focused organization, is now advocating for child rights online. Makes sense. And then governments, of course, you have, including the UN, like groups of governments like EU, the G7, or the G20. And then we have the private sector, everyone from Google and Etisalat to Facebook and hosts like GoDaddy, if you ever heard of it. Even device manufacturers like Samsung. So what are the issues? Now, this is probably especially what you are familiar with and what you face on your own, in your own experiences. So the first is net neutrality. There's VoIP, privacy and security issues. There's zero rating, encryption, data protection. I mean, really, it goes on and on and on. And like the more time that passes, more issues arise. One of them that I'm not going to cover in this lecture, but is becoming a hotter issue. Has anybody heard of right to be forgotten? Okay, maybe I should ask who hasn't heard of it. Anyways, the idea that data can be removed from the internet, but a key caveat here is that, let's say, so this happened, the EU basically passed a resolution that says, yes, if somebody wants something removed from the internet, they can request Google or Bing or whoever can take it off the internet. But with that said, a very key caveat is that content is largely never removed from the internet, especially with right to be forgotten. It's just not indexed anymore. So I could still technically find an article if I wanted to, it just won't come up on search engines. So that's a key caveat. But anyway, the first thing I want to talk about, I asked some people yesterday, like, has anybody heard of net neutrality? And people were like, no. So it's okay. It was covered earlier in this week, but basically what you need, if you've ever heard of net neutrality, if you hear of it often, what you need to know about it is that, remember those core values that I mentioned toward the beginning? The internet needs to be something that is open to everyone, that is open to anyone that has an idea, that wants to put it online. And net neutrality is the principle that helps keep data equal. So no matter if I'm going to Netflix, no matter if I'm going to Hulu, no matter if I'm going to Facebook, or if I'm going to some blog that gets 50 views a month, all of those sites should have equal access to the internet at equal speed. That is the principle of net neutrality. Now, the thing is, you might think, oh, what about this, what about this? Often how it manifests in reality is that companies would, like internet service providers, ISPs, they would charge a company like, let's say, Facebook or Netflix more for the data to use the fast lane of the internet, which is why you would often see something like a road being used. They would use that data, or rather they would charge more, so that would happen. I'm trying to check. I think we might have enough time. Let's see. Yeah, I'm going to play just another quick video about net neutrality. If possible. Can I play a video? Yeah.
What is net neutrality? Net neutrality is about choice. Who chooses the content you see and use on the internet? Right now, you do. You connect to the internet, open your browser, and navigate to the website of your choice. Net neutrality makes this possible because it prevents your internet provider from blocking access to those websites. What if one day you decided to look up something on Google, but found their website to be running so painfully slow that you could not use it? Or worse yet, you tried to navigate to google.com, but you could not connect to it. So instead, after much frustration, you decided to log on to the website of a different search engine to find what you wanted. Without net neutrality, the above scenario could become all too common. Your network provider, the company that operates your physical connections to the internet, might decide to degrade your access to a website like Google or block access entirely. Why would your provider do such a thing? Perhaps they signed an exclusive agreement with another search engine company. It would then be in the provider's best interest to divert you to that other company's service.
So, thank you. You get the point. It's something that obviously has economic repercussions and actually leads into another key point, which is zero rating. So raise your hand. Anybody heard of zero rating? No? Really? Nobody's heard of it? Oh, okay, great. So zero rating it's the practice of offering, let's say, access to a certain kind of app or a certain group of services for free. Now, whenever they say free, what that means is that nothing's free. Nothing is ever free. That's just a key principle of the world. So what happens is that telecom companies or individual service providers, they basically somehow make a deal where they will do some kind of sharing of money and provide very limited amounts of data for certain services at no charge. So if I have a phone and let's say I download Facebook's free basics application, I can go to Facebook, I can go to Messenger, I can go to Wikipedia, and I can use all these services for free. Now, can you imagine why this would be problematic? Especially if I'm taking a phone that's loaded with free basics and I'm giving it to somebody, let's say in rural India, where I used to live, and they've never even used the internet before. They've never heard of the internet. Give them this basically this service that is only part of the internet. It's a very tiny part of the internet. It's very, very problematic because it creates something called a walled garden. The idea being that people aren't being able to access all of the internet, they're only being able to access some of it. And it's actually been, free basics has been banned not just in India, it's actually been banned in Egypt as well. So we can't use it. This is binge on, it's something that's from T-Mobile, it's in the US. That has not been banned, that's still going. But zero rating is really something that internet governance activists, especially within civil society, they often, oh, she's sleeping. they often rail against. So now, this is a big issue, and this is something that isn't talked about enough in the internet governance community. It's cyber war. This is a real threat, I will be honest. Cyber war is something that the United States and NATO are already amping up their cyber defenses. They're trying to amp up their, how they fight cyber conflict. Does anybody, I don't know if anybody heard of Stuxnet? Stuxnet was a computer virus that was uploaded to Iranian centrifuges in, I want to say 2011. And basically it significantly crippled an enrichment facility in Iran. And so we are already seeing cyber war happening. And now imagine if cyber war was affecting something like satellites. Imagine if all of a sudden you have no communication. And not just you, everyone. It's a serious issue. It needs to be talked about more. Something else that we hear a lot about, another emerging issue, is something called the Internet of Things. Imagine if each of these little nodes was a device. Everything's being connected. You see how it's kind of like we're creating this giant sphere of information. So the Internet of Things, it's all internet-connected devices. Things like cars, appliances, watches, phones, but it's actually much more than that. Imagine that my toothbrush is connected. Imagine that my shower head is connected. Imagine the sidewalk is connected, trying to monitor how much moisture is on it at any given time. That's the Internet of Things. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of cybersecurity concerns for this. You know, what if everything around you was gathering data about you? What if everything around you was understanding how quickly your heart was beating, or you know, what if it knew if you were upset? What if it knew, you know, based on the levels of cortisone in your blood? What if, I don't necessarily know if now, they can't necessarily measure that now, but what if it could? The idea is, it's like, how do we regulate and how do we govern these kinds of devices? But yet it also encourages the development of something called, so cybersecurity is one downside, but then the upside is that it encourages something called 5G. So right now, most people might have, if you have a data connection on your phone, you might have 3G, which is third generation. But a lot of people, some people might have LTE, which is fourth generation mobile technology. 5 generation is basically what's going to make sure that all of these devices, all the devices, can be connected. And it would basically be like, yeah, like car-to-car communication, water quality, e-health, traffic, electrical management, maybe not in Lebanon, but smart parking, like keeping all these things together. That's Internet of Things. Now, this is one of my personally favorite topics because artificial intelligence. We see it a lot in the media. You've probably seen Terminator. This is what most people think when they think of artificial intelligence. Fair enough. You've seen it in The Matrix. You've seen it, if anybody's seen Ex Machina, came out in 2015. Great movie. I really recommend it. However, realistically, this is what we have for artificial intelligence. It's robots creating cars. This is the Tesla factory. This is Watson, who was designed by IBM. If anybody actually remembers IBM, it's still alive and kicking, and it's doing artificial intelligence. And this is a screenshot from when Watson, a computer, beat this guy. I forgot his name. As you can see, he lost, so why does it matter? And Watson, the computer, beat this famous Jeopardy player. He was like he's the uncontested champion at this point, and artificial intelligence beat him. Now, imagine, there's some people that have a really good view about artificial intelligence. They say, you know what, no matter what happens, as intelligence develops, emotion will develop, or not necessarily emotion, but empathy will develop. They say that we'll be able to wed human intelligence with artificial intelligence. That's people like Ray Kurzweil or Larry Page from Google. Then there's other people that are a bit more like, no, you have no idea, we are creating our evil robot overlords. And that's like Stephen Hawking, who's a very famous physicist. But then we have some uncertain people who, like one of my personal heroes is Elon Musk. And I'll tell you a little bit more about what he says. But he's a little bit more like, well, it could go one way or another. Let's see. So Stephen Hawking said the development of full artificial intelligence could spell the end of the human race. A little ominous, right? Well, Elon Musk is a little bit less, more hopeful, but not so much. He's saying we need to be super careful about AI because it could potentially be more dangerous than nuclear weapons. So, we'll see. But that's why we need to have really, really good policies that are governing these systems. What's going on right now in California at Google Labs and like at Facebook? I don't know. They don't let us in. They don't let us know. We don't know how close they are to creating super intelligence that's much, much greater than human intelligence. Who knows? But back to a little bit more like on the ground issues. Encryption, privacy, and cybersecurity. Very, very important if you're working in the media field. Encryption needs to be end-to-end, meaning that if I send a message to anyone, that message will not be able to be intercepted. It won't be able to be read. It's going to be protected, almost like getting into an armored car, an armored truck. You're in the armored truck when you get there, and you're in the armored truck when you get out. That's how it should be. It protects data. It ultimately protects data, and it protects us. Like I said, it's key for journalists and media professionals. And I like this comic because it's the idea that we just it's a little bit dated now because I don't know how many people still leave their passwords just lying around, but if everybody knew one's password, it wouldn't necessarily be defeating the purpose of cybersecurity. Does everybody know who this is? It's probably one of the most famous people of our decade, at least, and this is Edward Snowden. He was the one that leaked, as I think Moses was talking about this, he leaked all the information about the NSA obtaining, spying, basically surveilling and spying on people all around the world. And he is still very much an encryption advocate, and he's someone that really encourages us to be more careful when it comes to what we put online. So this is just a little something interesting. Basically, monitoring and surveillance are a big deal because they change how we behave online. If I know that you're watching me, I'm going to behave differently. I'm not going to say something that you don't want, that I think might be illegal. I'm not going to engage in a community that might be contentious. I'm not going to be fully immersing myself within this community. now within this digital space. And it undermines and erodes our confidence in things like being online. So there's this really well-known sociologist and philosopher called Michel Foucault. He's French. He talks about something called the Panopticon. The Panopticon is a circular prison where the guards are in the middle in a tower, and you don't actually know if they're ever watching you. You never know if they're watching you or not. You can't see them. The Panopticon has become a metaphor, an analogy for the surveillance state. 1984, V for Vendetta, whatever you want to call it. This is very much a real scenario. Whenever we feel that we're being monitored, we don't act out. Now, you might think, how do we know? This is how we know, because research has been done that shows that when people, so actually a study released in Journalism and Mass Communication Quarterly just this year, it said that when people have knowledge of government surveillance, they self-censor and they do not dissent online. So what's scary, though, about that is that the people, that you ever hear people saying, just for a second, you ever hear people saying, like, oh, I don't care about what I say online, I have nothing to hide, let them watch me, whatever. The thing is, those are the people that say that often are the ones that silencing themselves first. That's what's really scary. Those people that say, like, oh, it's necessary for national security or anything, they are the ones that are the most quickly to conform to majority opinions. Very, very scary stuff. However, I would say, thank you, privacy and security are not mutually exclusive. They're not mutually exclusive. Having security, because often what we have, like we talked about Apple versus FBI. We talked about things going on with cybersecurity, and you hear it a lot in the States because that's a lot of the private companies are. So that's where the U.S. gets the data from there. But this idea that we can be secure and private, they're not. What I mean by they're not mutually exclusive, they're like you don't need one or the other. You can have both. We can. But it's about how governments especially and how private companies are using that data. What is the solution? My solution is dialogue, transparency, and collaboration. That's what it is. How do we do that? Dialogue between privacy organizations, between governments, between private companies, transparency in how data is being used, and collaboration in how to create policies that are more inclusive of users, and at the same time can be aware and can be forward-thinking about the threats that are out there. Because the internet can be a very scary place. It can be an incredible place, but it can be very scary. That's the thing. It's a very dynamic, but at the same time vibrant creation. It's a creation. We have created it. And so, I don't know what just happened. Oh, of course, forgive me. Let me find it. It crashed, go figure. Here we go. So, with that said, now talking a little bit, let's get a little bit more into digital rights. Voice over IP. Voice over IP, if anybody wants to make a WhatsApp call or anything like that, if you are in any of these countries in the Middle East, you can't do it. You can't do it without something called a VPN, a virtual private network. Most of you probably know what a VPN is, I assume, if you're not from Lebanon. Because Lebanon, for whatever reasons, it's a little bit better here in terms of accessing content. But this is where VoIP is blocked everywhere. So how many people on a daily basis, if you feel comfortable raising your hand, how many people feel comfortable telling me if you use a VPN at least once a week? 4 or 5 hands. How many people have used a way, how many people have, here in this audience, have done something in order to get around a VoIP blockage? Like, let's say you want to call somebody, but you can't because it's not allowed. Has anybody done that? Oh. Can I repeat? Oh, sorry. How many people have in some way, have used some kind of app or some form of technology in order to get around these government bans on VoIP services. Okay, the point is it's about at least half of the room. So you know, why does VoIP get banned? It gets banned because generally there's a monopoly telecom that doesn't want to lose money. That's why it is. And so it's not because of security, it's not because of anything like that. That's just an excuse. That's generally speaking an excuse to prevent people from using technology that they want, so that they don't spend less, so that they spend less money as opposed to paying for more service. And I mean, and with that said, I mean, I don't need to tell anybody about how the Arab world has some of the highest rates of costs. It's like connected to the internet, either by phone or by broadband. It's the highest rates in the world in this region because, in part, of incumbent telecom operators. So, with that said, internet shutdowns. I mean, anybody who's here from Syria probably knows what an internet shutdown feels like. You cannot access it. I know what it's like from being in Turkey. Just, there were 15 documented shutdowns in 2015. Just in the first few months of 2016, there was already been 20. Some of these countries, you'll notice, are actually repeated. That's because they were shut down twice. They were shut down more than once. This is from Access Now. This is from a civil society organization. There is, the more years that pass, the tougher governments and others are getting on digital rights. And it's showing, the data shows it. So what about digital rights in the Arab world? Everybody, I can wait for a second. Sorry, I should have spent less time on infrastructure. Anyway, I have a quick video, but it's basically just exploring things that you probably likely already experienced. It's from IG MENA. It's something that we produced. I'll leave that to if you'd like to watch it on your own. I want to quickly, because I'm running out of time, so I want to kind of quickly run through the last little bit. It's digital media literacy and internet governance. I wanted to make this point. I don't know if you know this, but the UN has declared internet as a human right. It came out in June of this year. So access is a human right. Now, and this is just talking about, this is basically just saying, this is just saying the UN passed a non-binding resolution saying that yes, it is illegal or it is wrong for a government to shut down the internet. Oh, did you? Sorry. Somebody's taking a photo. And you'll get all of these slides. All of them you'll have. So as you can see, there are actually 3.5 billion people connected to the internet right now. There's a little bit more out of 7.25, so we're about half-half. Arab states, about 58.4%, so maybe almost 60%. So not bad, actually. The Arab world's actually not doing bad. I mean, it's doing better than Asian Pacific. Oh, I'm sorry. These are people not using the internet. Forgive me. These are not using the internet. So, so almost 60% of individuals are not using the internet in the Arab world. Sorry, that's actually quite bad. We need to work on that. We really need to work on that. There's internet development issues. For instance, there's digital divides. There's gender gaps. There's affordability issues. There's fixed lines versus mobile, meaning some people can access broadband, which is like plugging an Ethernet connection into your phone as opposed to your phone. There's issues with the global north versus global south. Speed, is a big issue. And then lastly, there's something called the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals. They were launched last year. One of them, this one here, 9, is all about infrastructure. And one of the things that they call for is for more access to the internet. Now, I think I'm running out of time, and I apologize. So I'm just going to be going a little bit even faster. So there are ways that companies are trying to expand internet access. One is through drones. Others through balloons, and then others are through satellite constellations. So imagine all these low Earth orbit satellites are just circling the globe and providing internet. That's something that some companies have this in mind. Yet access is the first A of media literacy, Yet focusing solely on access is incredibly problematic. And I hope the past week has explained why. Basically, if someone were to be empowered with the internet, yet they have no idea how to access it, especially if they've accessed it for the first time. They've never accessed, imagine never having access to the internet, and somebody gives you, the ability to access the internet. We need to know how to do that in a way that is advantageous to ourselves and beneficial to our communities, and knowing kind of what's out there. We need to be aware. We need to be literate. So internet governance in general, it needs four different things. We need to work on infrastructure. We need to work on services. We need to work on content. When I say content, by the way, and I'm really looking at all of you, we need more Arabic content. We need more local content. We need more content that's relevant to people in their respective regions. And then lastly, we need media literacy development. Again, none of this is important if we don't have that. It's not this way. It's that way. It's actually, it should be 4 to 1, not 1 to 4. Yes, sure. If you don't have access, you can't get on, period. So if you don't have the infrastructure, you can't do it. Fine, fair enough. But at the same time, I would say that not having the personal human capacity, the skills to do it, is much more important than actually having access. Anything can be connected, but few can actually use the internet. So I was going to play my podcast. I'm glad you already listened to it because I don't have time. But basically, it's the idea that I want to push for more media literacy in the internet governance community. I've actually been empowered with that idea now that I've been here. And actually, the same resolution that I was mentioning earlier about human rights, as the internet is a human right, the UN actually talks about media literacy in that same declaration. It's basically saying, yes, media literacy should happen. I didn't highlight it, but it's the idea that quality of education plays a decisive role in development and calls upon all states to promote digital literacy. So it's happening. We need to push for it more. Quickly, I'll just say, and digital literacy is all over the development world. In the sense of the reports, I was very surprised. I didn't realize it. It's there. There's World Economic Forum, World Bank Group, ITU, UNESCO. They're all saying we need more digital literacy. It's all all policy recommendations include something about digital literacy. So last little bit, I have like 2-3 minutes left, I think. Yeah, 2 minutes. Fine, fair enough. We started late. How do you get involved? How do you get involved in this community, this global community that is segmented into regions, that's segmented into organizations? One way is through my organization, IG MENA, Internet Governance in the MENA region. We do trainings, we do advocacy, we do capacity building, we host workshops, we host roundtables. We're hosting our first ever summit in Tunis this year. Is anybody here from Tunis? From Tunisia? That's okay. Maybe next year. It was launched in 2012 by the development group HIVOS, which is a Dutch NGO. And one of the things that we do, and that's our website, one of the things that we do is called the Internet Legislation Atlas. So it actually maps out internet policy and internet laws all around the region. These are the countries that we're working in right now, including Syria, by the way. There are Syrian laws on the books. And this is the way it would look. This is Lebanon. So this is there's the media law, there's the e-transactions law, there's the penal code. All of these things have to do with the internet, how the internet is governed in this country. And then lastly, and there's a few other things. You can join the Internet Society. The Internet Society has local chapters. There's local chapters in almost all of the countries in the Arab world. There's an ICANN group called the Middle East Adjoining Country Special Working Group, and it works on strategy in the region. All of these links you'll get. There's something more technical, the Middle East Network Operators Group, which hosts annual meetings. There's also the Arab IGF, as I said. It's held each year. There's IGF initiatives you can get in, the Internet Governance Forum initiatives. I encourage everyone to check out, which is one is including connecting the next billion. How do we connect the next billion people to the internet? They want to know. There's best practice forums, which some of them include gender and access. So how can we best get women? How can we bridge that digital divide between women and access? Same with dynamic coalitions. One of them including youth and gender. They're two different ones, but basically how do we get more people involved? How do we get more people engaged? So quickly, internet is not a panacea, and ICTs are not a panacea, meaning the internet will not solve the world problems. Please, technology is not going to save the world. I'm saying that right now. It's not going to. It is a tool. It empowers us. However, there is much more to it than that. The development and evolution of the internet demonstrates one thing. Our savior is collaboration. If we're not working together, we're not going to do anything. The internet came about because we were working together. Our solutions to global problems are going to be solved not by technology, but by us working together. It's that simple. So I just want to point out one thing, by the way, just before I wrap up. There were three key years to my professional path. One was 2010, another was 2011, and another was 2015. The first one, 2010, I went and presented here at the launch of the Internet Society chapter in Cinefil. The next one was that a paper that I authored, that I co-authored in a class, don't go anywhere, Jed, was published. I published my first paper on the internet, one that I took with at AUB. Then lastly, this is a photo of me with this is Elsa Sadeh, who's a Lebanese activist. She's a Lebanese digital rights activist. And these are a few other people who are all around the world. We met at IGF. It's kind of funny that he stepped out of the room, but I wanted to extend a very warm and very special thanks to Jad Melki, who is here, who's doing all this, who basically is the reason why I'm here. If it weren't for Jad, I honestly don't know how I would be doing what I love. So I really appreciate Jad for all of the work that he's done and all the work he continues to do to inspire students and inspire me. So thank you. Right on time. It was actually just an hour. But thank you. Thank you. By the time we started, by the time we ended, it was exactly an hour. Yeah. So, danke Adwig Tirschwei. Jad, you missed it, but I was saying you're awesome. Thanks.
Well, thank you. I just want to ask about the dark web. You mentioned that drug dealers and weapon dealers usually use it. What about the government control? Is there a tracking for this kind of web, or it's impossible to be tracked?
That's a great question. Nothing on the internet is impossible to be tracked. Know that. If you're using private browsing or using Tor, which is an anonymous browser, technology is always able to be tracked. Unless you're using very highly sophisticated stuff, you know exactly what you're doing, you can always be tracked. Which, just if I can make just a sub point real quick, this is including for digital activists, for journalists. If you're trying to get around government censorship, if you're worried that the government is monitoring you, know that they can get around even if you're using these tools. So with that said, going back to your question, the dark web. There's Europol and Interpol, which are international organizations that are in the FBI that do engage in activities with using their own computer hackers and whatnot that follow the trail. And eventually someone will slip up in some way and they will crack down. That's how they got Silk Road, which there's this organization called Silk Road, which did a lot of piracy. That's how they got Pirate Bay. And now they got kick-ass torrents as well. So they're using technology to root out technology. So with that said, in terms of drug dealers and weapons dealers, I mean, they would use it the same way. But I don't know the statistics of how often people are caught. It would be good to know, but it'd be something that I don't know if governments necessarily would release that information.